Okay, sizing your strip of metal, guys, requires a couple new tools. So after you've decided exactly how you want your band to be designed, whether you're going to put a texture on it, you're going to saw into it, you're going to put negative space into it, I'm not really sure. It kind of depends on what you do first before you actually cut it to the right size. So you're all going to get a strip of metal that's 3 inches long by 3/8 wide, okay? Oh. If you are only adding a texture to your metal with hammers and stamps, you would do that on the piece of metal first, along the whole entire strip, okay? These strips are longer than the size that you need. If you're going to saw into it, along the edges or into the actual center to make negative spaces, you would size it first, trim off what you don't need, and then saw into it. Does that make sense? So if you're adding a texture, you do it before you size it. If you're sawing into the edges or into the center, you do it after you size it. Has everybody got it? Okay. Before you cut into it, you got to know what size finger you have, or if you're making it for somebody else, you need to get their finger size. There's a couple tricks to doing that if it's a secret. So, has everybody seen one of these before? This is called a finger gauge. It's gauging your finger. It's telling you what gauge your finger is. So, if you see a 5/, that's a 5.5. If you see a 5 by itself, that's just a regular 5. Okay? And all of you guys that were wondering about those crazy tools down there that look like a weapon, those are actually ring mandrels. Did you ever take a look at those? There's numbers on them.
Yep.
They correspond to this. So you're going to learn how to use that later. Okay? First step, figuring out your finger size. So this is kind of loose, right? It's a little bit loose, so I would probably say, this might fall off my finger. So I would step down. That's a 6.5. I'm going to go down to a 6 and say, oh, that's kind of better. And these are pretty thin, right? Your band is going to be wider, so you want to have a little bit of wiggle room because the width of your band is going to kind of make it a little tighter. Okay? So that's how you do that. So once you figure it out, you take something like this. This is called a jewelry maker's scale. It's called a ring scale. And it actually has the exact sizes that you would need. So if I'm going to measure this and I want this to be a 6.5, I'm going to go like this. Can you see this, Josh? So at the end of this ring shank, there's a line. Do you see that? I Xerox these because they will lose them. You put the edge at that mark, and then you go over here and you say, okay, oops, there's my 6. And what I do is I ask Trevor to open my marker for me, and then I'll make a mark on here so that I can scribe a line. So I found the 6 mark. It goes 6, and then there's a dash, and then there's an 8. So I'm going to tell you right now, it's a little challenging to make it the exact size because, look, you only have a little tiny bit of space, right, to go all the way up to the next size. So at 6.5, I'm going to put the 6.5 mark. This is at 7, this is at 6, so I'm going to put a mark in between those two. I'm making it a little bit larger because I'm not going to make it for myself. Okay, there's my line. However, on this it says, note, add 3 times the thickness of the metal to the ring. What the heck does that mean? Okay, this is where math comes into play, Jake. Where you at? Matt, where you at? Okay, 3 times the thickness of something reminds you of what type of formula? If we're making a circle, 3 times is really close to what number? 3 is close to what magical number? Pi! Very good. So when you're trying to make the ring size, if you were to just cut it at 6.5 and you bent it around, that would be the outside circumference of the size. We need the inside circumference because that's what your finger needs to fit into. Does that make sense? So you're going to add 3 times the thickness of your metal, aka pi, and that will make that 6.5 be the inside circumference. Okay, that's very important. I've already figured out the math for you. 3 times the thickness of this piece of metal, you stack 3 of these on top of one another, is 2.5 millimeters. All of this stuff is written over there at the ring station, so you don't have to remember all this, but I want you to understand where it's coming from. So I'm going to add how much to this line? 2.5 millimeters. So I'm done using my bracelet gauge and ring gauge, and I'm done using my finger gauge. Now I need to use a ruler. But you need to know what millimeters are, okay? Millimeters are on the centimeter side, right? Because it's the meters. So make sure you find centimeters, and there's little MMs. Does anybody know what line is the millimeter? It's the smallest one we have on this ruler. So if we're moving over 2.5, it's a slight estimate, guys. I'm going to put it at that spot right there, and I'm going to go 1, 2, in between. It almost looks like 1/8 of an inch in reality, okay? So I got my mark. I'm going to saw that. I'm going to saw it off. And then since I'm not a machine, I have to file it, right? So when you file, review, you file away from you, and I'm going across the whole surface, and I'm anchoring my hand down. I'm never like this. I'm not getting anything done, okay? So anchor it down and really press on the going away. And once I get it all flat, I can bend my metal so that I'm ready to solder. Okay, see that? That is a size 6.5 ring. Now, I'm going to bend this up so that I create a seam. Now, this is where you might notice that your seam is a little bit crooked. Soldering is like a prima donna, and it does not like to have gaps. It will not fill a gap. So this line, edge, and this edge have to be totally flush with one another, okay? So the way that I bend this up, I'm not worried about making this a circle right now. I'm actually going to make this like a D shape, flat on the top. After it's soldered, that's when I'm going to round it, okay? So I'm not worried about making something round right now. Is everybody okay with me right now? Okay. Am I going too fast? No. Okay. I got 2 pairs of pliers. It doesn't really matter what kind of pliers you use. You just want to make sure you're not getting ones with teeth. What would the teeth do to your metal?
Put a stamp on it.
Yeah, they put like marks all over it. Maybe you want to do that, and if you do that, you got to make it on purpose. So I'm going to take a pair of pliers, and I'm going to begin by making it go up into a U. All right? Then I'm going to bend it down. And this is where you might want to use 2 pairs of pliers because sometimes it's easier. Okay? Now I got it flat, but I got to put it together now. Is everybody okay? Mm-hmm. All right. This is where it gets a little tricky. So I'm getting there, right? I'm getting close. Your goal is to make that piece of metal be exactly flush with one another. Okay, so if it's like this, that's not good enough. If it's like this, there's a little gap. So I do a little technique. Once I get it together, I go like this. I'll take the top of it and I'll go shh, and I'll force it to go over it a little bit, and then I'll force the bottom piece to go over, and then it will snap closed. I know, it's kind of weird, so let me show you what it does. So I'm going to take this, and I'm going to push this top piece, the one side, on top of it. Okay? Then I'm going to switch it. And then I'm going to push it like that a little bit. You're kind of tightening the edges so that it goes together rather than trying to pull apart. Because when you add heat to metal, did you notice that it moves? Did you notice that metal kind of moves when it gets heated up? This is trying to reinforce that if it gets heated up, it will still try to maintain its elasticity of staying closed. Okay? So, did you hear that snap? Kinda? Did you hear it? That's it snapping into place. You're gonna make me do it again, Junior. Okay. You see that? That's a pretty good seam. There's not really a gap there. Okay, if you're concerned, you could hold it up to the light, and if you see like a big gap in between there, then you gotta open it up and file it again. Okay? But this is pretty good. I'm ready to solder. And as long as it's clean like this and I haven't heated it up, I can solder right now. Your solder seam, your metal has to be clean. Okay? If you're doing a heat patina on this, if you're doing a patina, a liver of sulfur patina, are you going to do that right now?
No.
No, you'll just burn it off, right? So you always do all your soldering beforehand. And we're going to look at our little list later. Okay, so the next step would be to solder this closed. Thank you. You can stop it now.